I still remember the day I left Missouri, saying goodbye to the rugged, expansive vistas that stretched endlessly around my family's ranch in the tiny town of Cedarville. Life there was simple, maybe too simple for a young man with dreams bigger than the skies above. Cedarville was more of a large family gathering than a town, with my relatives making up a good chunk of the population. I grew up in a household bustling with 4 siblings under the stern yet caring watch of my dad, after we lost our mom to heart disease when I was just a youngster. Her absence left a void in our lives, casting a shadow that never really faded. At 20, fueled by ambition and a bit of youthful restlessness, I decided it was time to carve out my own path. That path led me straight to Indiana, hand in hand with my girlfriend, Leslie, who'd been my rock since we met. What had started as a long-distance conversation bloomed into a partnership strong enough to pull me hundreds of miles away from everything I knew. Leslie had recently bought a house on the outskirts of a small Indiana town, not quite as isolated as my Missouri home, but rural enough to feel familiar. The transition was exhilarating at first. Indiana offered a freshness, a new landscape that seemed ripe with opportunities, especially for someone aspiring to be a veterinarian. The proximity to a nearby city meant that everything we needed was just a short drive away, unlike the long treks back in Missouri. But as we settled in, the idyllic setting started to reveal its cracks. Leslie had warned me about the house's eerie history. Long-standing rumors of hauntings and strange occurrences had been a part of its legacy. Some stories were easily dismissed as rural legends, but others were rooted in unsettling truths. Before Leslie moved in, the house had been the target of several break-ins, a fact our neighbors were quick to confirm without prompting. But what troubled Leslie the most was the mysterious man who seemed overly familiar with her new home. She'd seen him several times before I moved in, always during the day. He'd appear at the end of our road, his presence ominous as he made his way slowly to the house, peering into windows with a chilling intensity. Despite her calls to the police, he vanished each time before they arrived, like a ghost slipping through the cracks of reality. Living in a rural area has its charms, but it also attracts those looking to escape notice. The countryside could be a haven for the best of people and a hiding spot for the worst, offering solitude to those with darker intentions. This man's repeated appearances had left Leslie shaken, understandably so. Although I wasn't scared, I was deeply concerned. To reassure Leslie, I reminded her of the precautions we had in place. My collection of firearms and knives was more than just a hobby. It was a line of defense. From the pump-action shotgun to the .45 handgun and a trusty revolver, I felt equipped to handle any threat. But nothing could have prepared us for that night when our fears became reality. It was around 10:30 p.m., and we were nestled on the couch, a movie playing softly as we drifted in and out of sleep. The sudden, loud knock at the front door shattered the calm of the night, jolting us awake. My heart raced as I sprang up, grabbing my shotgun from our bedroom closet. Peeking through the blinds, the chill of recognition crawled down my spine. It was him, the same man Leslie had seen, now standing at our doorstep, his intentions unreadable in the dim porch light. Leslie confirmed it was him without a doubt, her voice trembling with fear. He hadn't noticed us yet. Steeling myself, I opened the door ready for confrontation, but he was already retreating into the shadows. I stepped outside, the cool night air prickling my skin as I thought I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. "Leslie, get the .45 and wait in the bedroom," I instructed, my voice low but firm. She nodded, retreating inside as I scoured the perimeter, my shouts for the man to show himself cutting through the silence. That's when I noticed the shed side door, gaping open like a dark invitation. I approached cautiously, hearing faint noises from within. Anger surged within me. This stranger was not only violating our sanctuary but terrorizing Leslie. I wouldn't let that stand. Creeping to the doorway, I poised on the threshold, ready to confront whatever, or whoever, lurked inside. The moment I stepped fully into the frame, the noises ceased. He must have sensed my presence. I reached for the light switch, only to find it futilely unresponsive. Then, in a heart-stopping rush, I heard him charge towards me. I instinctively stepped back, firing the shotgun by accident. The blast echoed in the night, yet it didn't deter him. He kept coming. We faced off, just feet apart in the dim glow of the moonlight, my gun trained on him. His taunts filled the air, goading me, but I stood firm, the weight of my responsibility to protect my home steadying my resolve. As police sirens began to wail in the distance, I saw his resolve falter. I seized the moment, tackling him to the ground, securing him in a hold until the officers arrived. Leslie had called the police, a move I hadn't instructed but was grateful for. As we handed him over to the authorities, the reality of our situation sunk in. Despite the restraining order now in place, the fear lingered. Would he come back? What would we face next? These questions haunted us, even as we contemplated moving. But one thing was clear. Whatever the future held, I would defend our home, our lives, with everything I had. Family comes first, always. In the days that followed that terrifying encounter, our house felt less like a home and more like a fortress under siege. Leslie and I spent long hours discussing our options, weighing the practicality of moving against the financial constraints that bound us to this place. She had poured nearly all her savings into the down payment of this house, dreaming of a peaceful life that now seemed like a naive fantasy. The man was arrested that night, but the relief was fleeting. The possibility of his return loomed over us, a constant shadow that tainted every creak and whisper of the wind through the trees. Despite the restraining order, the rural quiet of our surroundings, once comforting, now underscored our isolation. We knew all too well that if he chose to disregard the law, there was little stopping him from returning. This persistent unease seeped into every aspect of our lives. Leslie's once bright and cheerful demeanor had dimmed, her smiles more forced, her laughter less frequent. I hated seeing her like this. My partner, my love, reduced to a state of constant vigilance. It was a stark reminder of how quickly things could change, how a single individual's dark intentions could disrupt our peace. Determined to reclaim some sense of normalcy, I took it upon myself to enhance our home security. I installed new locks, added motion sensor lights around the property, and set up security cameras at strategic points. Each new measure was a small step toward making Leslie feel safe again. But the true test came with time and the absence of further incidents. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, the immediate fear began to ebb. Our routines resumed, though altered by heightened awareness and the subtle undercurrent of caution that colored our daily lives. The man remained in jail, to the best of our knowledge, and no further sightings or incidents occurred. It seemed, perhaps, we might move forward after all. However, the tranquility was not to last. One brisk autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard, an unexpected chill sent a shiver down my spine. I was out back, clearing some debris from the garden when I noticed something off. A slight disturbance at the edge of the woods, a flicker of movement that was too deliberate to be an animal. Heart sinking, I hurried inside to check the security cameras. There, on the grainy footage, was the unmistakable figure of a man at the far edge of our property, his movements hesitant yet purposeful. It wasn't clear enough to confirm his identity, but every instinct screamed that it was him, back as we had feared. Leslie watched the footage over my shoulder, her hand gripping mine with a strength that belied her trembling body. "What are we going to do?" she whispered, her voice a mix of fear and defiance. "We do what we must," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "We protect our home, stand our ground, and we fight if it comes to that. But above all, we do it together." The decision was made without another word. We would not be driven from our home by fear. The next day, I contacted a friend from my days in Missouri, a seasoned hunter with a knack for security. Together, we devised a plan to ensure our safety, a strategy that involved both high-tech surveillance and some good old-fashioned defensive tactics. The weeks that followed were a tense vigil, but we were not unprepared. I trained with my firearms more rigorously, ensuring that if I ever needed to defend our home again, I would not hesitate. Leslie and I practiced emergency drills, ran through scenarios to ensure she could handle herself if I wasn't immediately at her side. The man never made a direct approach after that sighting, perhaps deterred by our preparations or perhaps biding his time. But we didn't lower our guard, not even for a moment. And as each day passed, our resolve hardened, turning our fear into a forge for strength and determination. Living under such conditions changed us in ways I couldn't have anticipated. The ordeal bonded us more deeply, each challenge faced together reinforcing the foundation of our relationship. Through it all, Leslie's courage astonished me. Her resilience, her capacity to love and laugh even in the face of our trials, inspired me daily. As I reflect now on those tumultuous months, I see them not just as a time of fear and challenge, but as a profound testament to the power of standing together. Whether our unwelcome visitor ever dares to return, he will find not just a house, but a fortress. Not just two people, but an unbreakable union, ready to protect what we hold dear at any cost. Family comes first, always. And in this house, this life we've built, Leslie and I have created a family of two, fortified by love, strengthened by adversity, and unyielding in the face of whatever shadows may loom on our horizon. The summer of 2002 was supposed to be a routine family vacation to Louisiana, a tradition we held dear every year. It was a break from the sweltering heat of Manhattan, where my father worked long hours that kept him tied up in meetings more often than not. This year, however, he was delayed even more, promising to join us a few days later. My mom, ever the proactive planner, didn't want to wait around in the city, so she decided we would head up first and he would catch up when he could. I was 14 at the time, old enough to understand the tensions of adult life, but still young enough to feel the sting of annoyance over having our plans shuffled around. My younger brother, Alex, and sister, Emily, shared my sentiments as we piled into the car, a packed station wagon that was always part of our family adventures. The drive from Manhattan to Louisiana is one I could almost navigate in my sleep, given how many times we'd done it. Yet, every journey has its surprises, and this trip was no exception. Various delays, a flat tire, endless construction, and a couple of wrong turns courtesy of our outdated GPS had us arriving much later than expected. To our dismay, the quaint charm of the town was lost in the pitch black of night, and worse yet, the owners of the house we were renting had long since gone to bed, unreachable and unaware of our predicament. Stuck without keys and unable to access our rental home, my mom, undeterred as ever, decided it was the perfect opportunity to indulge in some local cuisine. When in Louisiana, eat lobster, she'd always say. We stopped at a familiar spot, a cozy seaside restaurant that somehow felt like it was welcoming us back personally. As we settled into our meal, my mom attempted to coordinate a backup plan with my dad back in New York. After a frustratingly brief call, she learned that all local hotels were booked solid. No surprise given the peak of vacation season. The plan quickly shifted to finding accommodation in the nearest town until we could retrieve our keys. That's when the local man approached us. He seemed to materialize out of thin air, casually striking up a conversation with my mom as if they were old acquaintances. At first, I didn't think much of it. People in Louisiana are known for their friendliness. But as he lingered, listening in on our situation, I began to feel uneasy. When my mom got off the phone, he returned, offering a solution so bizarre it sent chills down my spine. He was well-dressed, his appearance neat and his demeanor calm, mentioning offhand that he worked in finance, a detail that seemed to resonate with my mom, a seasoned investment banker herself. He offered us a stay at his guest house, assuring us that his wife wouldn't mind. Everything about the offer screamed no to me, but my mom, after a brief chat about mutual financial markets, seemed convinced of his sincerity. Against my better judgment, we followed him in our car to his house. It was a sprawling estate, hidden away by a thick forest, the kind of place you'd miss if you blinked while driving past. The guest house was impressive, a quaint structure that looked like it belonged in a travel magazine. Yet something felt off. The beds in the two bedrooms were oddly positioned directly under the windows, not in the middle of the room as one would expect. It struck me as peculiar, but exhaustion was beginning to cloud my judgment. We settled in for the night, but comfort was elusive. About 30 minutes after we'd said our goodnights, there was a knock at the door. It was our host, checking in, polite, but unnecessary. Then, strangely, he returned twice more under the guise of ensuring we were comfortable. Each visit felt more intrusive than the last, and by the third knock, my mom's patience had worn thin. I tried to sleep, but restlessness and a growing sense of dread kept me wide awake. The guest house was too quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies every small sound into a cacophony. That's when the rustling started. Soft at first, then unmistakably closer, almost against the very walls of the house. Suddenly, my mom's hand shot up, her finger pointing towards the window. My heart stopped. Silhouetted against the moonlit glass was a figure, a man, just standing there, watching. I froze, terror taking hold as I realized the grave mistake we might have made by trusting a stranger. The figure at the window lingered like a specter, motionless and silent, a chilling presence in the moonlight that spilled through the uncurtained pane. The rustling noise had stopped, replaced by the stifling quiet of the room, thick with tension. I didn't dare move. My body was gripped by an icy fear. Beside me, I could hear my mom's quiet, controlled breathing as she assessed the situation with a calmness that belied her true feelings. It felt like an eternity that the figure stood there, just watching. Then, almost as silently as he had appeared, he turned and walked away from the window. The moment he moved, the spell of paralysis that had gripped me broke. I turned to my mom, who was already whispering orders in a hushed, urgent tone. "Get your things. Now," she instructed, her voice a mixture of fear and determination. There was no question of staying any longer. We needed to leave, immediately. The man's unnerving return visits earlier in the night, and now this, had confirmed our worst suspicions about the seemingly kind offer we had accepted. We moved quickly, gathering our belongings in a frantic, Silent rush. My mom was on the phone with my dad, her voice low and tense. I couldn't catch everything they were saying, but the urgency in her tone conveyed more than words could. My siblings were scared, their faces pale in the dim light as we prepared to leave this nightmare behind. We tiptoed out of the guest house, our steps muffled by the thick grass, each of us glancing around nervously as if the man could emerge from the shadows at any moment. My heart hammered in my chest as we approached our car, the gravel driveway crunching softly under our feet. Once we were all inside the car, my mom didn't hesitate. She drove around to the front of the main house to make a swift exit, but as we rounded the corner, a sinking feeling deepened. The house was dark, eerily silent, the porch and windows devoid of light. It was as though no one had been home at all. The driveway, previously occupied by the local's car and another we assumed belonged to his wife, was now ominously empty. This revelation was a cold splash of reality on the fear that had been mounting within us. Something was very wrong. The friendly local with a big house and a guest home was perhaps not who he claimed to be. My mom's voice broke the silence, sharp and clear. "We're leaving now." As we approached the gate at the end of the driveway, our last obstacle loomed before us. It was securely padlocked, an unmistakable barrier meant to keep us from leaving. Panic flared up in me, but my dad's voice came through the phone, steady and commanding even from miles away. "Ram it," he instructed firmly, knowing our SUV could take the impact. With a determined grimace, my mom accelerated, and the gate buckled under the force of our vehicle, metal groaning as we broke free. We didn't stop to look back, the SUV's headlights cutting through the darkness as we made our way back to the main road. The drive back to New York City was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts, replaying the events of the night over and over. It was clear we had escaped from a potentially dangerous situation, but the reality of it was a lot to process. In the weeks that followed, my parents were tight-lipped about the incident. It was a chapter none of us wanted to revisit. However, curiosity got the better of me one evening during a family gathering where my uncle had had a bit too much to drink. I asked him about that night, and his response was cryptic but telling. "They didn't tell you? The actual owners of that house were on vacation," he slurred before being hushed by my aunt. This piece of information was a chilling confirmation of our suspicions. The man who had offered us hospitality was not the owner of the property. We had been lured into a trap, the nature of which we could only speculate. The implications of what could have happened if we hadn't left when we did were terrifying. Years later, this incident remains a stark reminder of the importance of caution and skepticism, even in seemingly benign situations. Our family never returned to Louisiana, and the experience has woven itself into the fabric of our cautionary tales, a vivid memory that continues to influence how we approach the unknown. The man's identity and his intentions that night remain a mystery, one that perhaps is better left unsolved, as we continue to cherish the safety and unity of our family above all else.